So good, it's still morning, right? Yes, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the last session in our IDAS conundrum track. I have to now insert the joke about me being the thing standing between you and lunch, or in my case, breakfast, because I didn't have time to eat breakfast this morning. So good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Hunter. I am a principal program manager for Microsoft working on Visual Studio Team Services, which is Visual Studio in the cloud, the cloud-based solution for application lifecycle management and code and build and version control and all of those good things. This may come as a surprise to some of you because many of you have seen me present here and at Gartner and at other events previously, and many of you know that for a very long time I was an identity architect inside of Microsoft's internal IT department, working alongside my track coordinator, Mr. Poole. About a year ago, I decided to go on a little adventure. I work for a software company. I should go and learn how to build a shipping product, see what that's like. Take a 20-year server infrastructure lady and plop her in the middle of the developer division and have her go, developers, what do you people want from me? Working for a cloud service is kind of interesting. You learn a lot. Like how much you hate the red team. Oh, those guys always get in. It's terrible. But kind of one of the interesting things that I learned was I got to learn about a whole new constituency, a whole new customer base. Enterprise software developers, small team software developers, hobbyist developers, K through 12, university students. And what do developers want? It's like the title of a movie, sort of. And kind of the big theme that keeps coming around to us is every customer that we talk to, every customer that Visual Studio works with, no matter the size, small to ridiculously large, everyone is on this journey towards agile software development. Microsoft themselves have been on a journey towards agile software development. We have our cloud services, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Visual Studio. We run on 3-week sprint cycles. We release to the cloud every 3 weeks. We have some of our services that have been scaled down to microservices, release every 24 hours. Chew on that for a minute. And why do we do this? This is, why is everyone in the industry so interested in this new methodology? And the reason that we think about it, and the reason why it's such a focus for people is, if we think about back in the box product days, although people do still build box products, it's kind of retro. When we think about box products, when Brian and I would be sitting in Microsoft IT, and hey, it's time to build the next version of Windows Server, and members of the Active Directory product team would come to us and they would say, hey Laura, can you tell us what your software requirements are going to be for the next version of Windows Server? What we didn't think about at the time was that what they were actually asking us was, what are your software requirements going to be in 18 months? Because that's how long it's going to take us to even get an alpha out the door, not even a customer-facing beta. What are your software requirements going to be in 18 months? Think about that even more. What they're actually asking is, what business opportunities are you going to be trying to respond to in 18 months so that I can plan your software release now so that I can spend 18 months coding and testing and blah, blah, blah. Seems kind of obvious in retrospect that clearly we needed a better model. And so software companies of all sizes, from the individual developer up to your big Fortune 100 corporations like Microsoft, we all want to shorten our time to market, which is why Agile is such a big focus for every customer that we talk to in the software development space, enterprise or otherwise. We've also noticed that expectations of developers, so expectations of developers by the companies that employ them, have changed. 15 years ago, if you walked into one of my customers' offices, TFS, Team Foundation Server at the time, this is what it would have looked like. We are a Windows shop building Windows software using .NET for our managed code and C++ for our unmanaged stuff. 5 years ago, we would have looked something like this. Hey, wait a minute. There are actually other operating systems and tools in the world, and maybe we should build out support for them because our customers are embracing things like open source systems. And so we started building in support for Linux, support for other languages, things like JavaScript. Today, the field is just busted wide open. You know, we need to be able to develop for Windows and Linux and iOS and Android. And don't even get me started on the number of different languages. And this creates an expectation on the part of development organizations that the developers they employ are going to have this breadth of understanding of all of these different platforms, of all of these different languages. And that expectation works in two directions. So not only do enterprises and software companies expect more of their developers, developers entering into the job market expect more of the companies that they're going to be working for. They expect to be able to work with the tools they become familiar with, whether it's familiarization that they gain through university or just dorking around in their home labs. They want to be able to use these tools that they've grown up with, that they've become familiar with. And this is this choice economy that we're all kind of growing up with. The viral adoption of cloud services itself kind of leads to this phenomenon, kind of leads to this behavior, because it's become really easy to go out on GitHub, go out on Codeplex and say, hey, I need a version control tool. I like that one, so I'm going to use it. You know, we don't have this notion anymore of these monolithic suites of developer applications. And when I say that developers are expecting to have this kind of freedom, to have this kind of choice, that then bleeds back to the companies who are employing them. Because if you want to employ the best talent, you need to be able to offer them the tools that they want to work with. Like, the iron fist of IT is over. You can't just say, we are a .NET shop and that's it. You know, we have long passed, I think, the Clint Eastwood Gran Torino get off my lawn phase. If you are going to be competitive in the software development market, whether you are an employer of developers or a developer looking to go and make a lot of money, you need to be able to have this breadth of understanding and this ability to support this heterogeneous sort of world that we now live in. Now here's what's interesting. I've been talking for 8.5 minutes. What word have I not said yet? I have not said the word identity. Andre's about to run in here and say, did you remember that this is the Cloud Identity Summit? Yeah, exactly. I have not yet said the word identity. Because when I look at what my customers are passionate about, they're passionate about version control, and they're passionate about build, and they're passionate about enterprise work item tracking, and enterprise managing Agile at scale, scrums of scrums. These are the things that my customers are passionate about, which means that when I, as a program manager inside of the Visual Studio team, go and talk to my leadership about, hey, these are the things that we need to invest in within our cloud service, my leadership are passionate about the things my customers are passionate about. They're passionate about build and version control and forking and all of these really good things. I try to talk to them about identity and how important identity is to securing the enterprise software development process, to securing even small team development process. And I'm kind of the mad identity scientist within my org, which means that I talk about these things. I talk about identity, and I talk about provisioning, and I talk about SAML, and I talk about OpenID Connect, and my leadership kind of look at me like, you keep using these words, and we understand that you say it's important, but right now we have 3 full feature teams, 50 people, give or take, who are building identity technologies, who are building the authentication and the authorization and the auditing stack inside of Visual Studio. And we want them to go build other things. We want them to go build features that are going to make Visual Studio a competitive product inside the software development market. And so when I think about identity as a service, when I think about Azure Active Directory, spoiler alert, we use Azure Active Directory. We get a really good deal on licensing. Just kind of want to throw that out there for you. when I think about identity as a service, kind of one of the really compelling benefits to me as a builder of software that I want to sell to my customers is the fact that I kind of get this stuff for free. I can take these multiple dozens of developers that I have historically had building out identity infrastructure within my service, because Visual Studio existed before Azure AD did, so we did what we had to do to get up in the cloud and make our service run. By taking that dependency on an IDaaS solution like Azure Active Directory, I am able to get things like authentication and authorization and auditing and all of these good things. I am able to build these things into my service, and I am able to make these things a selling proposition to my customers without necessarily needing to invest all of my own developer resources into it. I can call Alex Simons and I can say, Alex, my customers really need this, this, and this. You're going to go build that into Azure AD, right? And usually he says yes. Sometimes he says no. It's an ongoing conversation. And the reason this is important is because my customers actually do care. They actually do care about identity. They just don't know they care. And so it becomes the job of people like me, people like Sean, people like Alex, to be able to educate my customers as to the benefits that something like an identity as a service provider brings them. If I say words like authentication and authorization, they're just going to stare at me like, I've read Vittorio's blogs, but I don't actually understand why I, as the director of software development for a big company, I don't know why I care about that. Put it in terms they do care about. Put it in terms they do understand. They absolutely care about having people have the necessary access to the things that they need to get their jobs done, so that they're not paying these immensely qualified and very well paid developers to sit on their hands while they wait for the IT department to click the buttons to give them access to the things they need. We're on a 3-week sprint cycle, people. I can't sit around and wait for this. I just need stuff to go. They care about being able to have the confidence that when they're working with business partners, when they're working with software vendors, that they can manage the relationships with these software vendors in a secure way. This especially comes into play in the software development space, because so much software development work becomes a matter of engaging with contractors, engaging with offshore firms. You need to be able to have that confidence and that attestation around, I can grant access to this project, to this development firm, to this contracting firm, but they've only have access to the things I've given them access to. And when I terminate my relationship with that contractor, or just when the project ends, they've lost access to my systems. IDaaS gives this to us. They want to be able to understand when someone's account has been compromised, or maybe it's not even an account that's been compromised, maybe it's someone who is in their employ who has demonstrably become some form of bad actor. We'll talk about Captain America later. We'll just move on from that. When you're talking about being a software vendor, being an independent software vendor, or being a slightly less than independent software vendor when you work for Microsoft, you think about how you can protect your environment in the face of, yes, I want to move faster. Yes, I want to have combined engineering. I want to have this really short kill chain between build, test, deploy. I still need to have protections in place. I don't want to have an errant piece of software released into production without the necessary checks and balances in place. I want to be able to ensure that the people who are deploying my production software out to hundreds of thousands of my customers aren't walking around with administrative credentials all the time. Because remember what I said about hating the red team? This actually helps you beat the red team. It's kind of a goal of mine. Software automation. If any of you were in Brian Poole's talk on Monday, he'd mentioned the notion of service accounts and service automation, and the fact that Passwords are dying, but they're not necessarily dead because of things like service automation. If you're in a DevOps kind of world, if you're doing continuous integration and continuous deployment, a lot of our customers talk about, I want strong authentication for service automation. Specifically, I want 2FA for my service accounts. And this is such an interesting conversation to me because if you think about 2FA as a term of art, 2FA implies an interrupt to the user experience. I'm going to prompt you for a PIN. I'm going to ask you to answer a phone. I'm going to ask you to do a thing. That's what 2FA generally, as we've come to understand it, means. Service automation means that I'm taking the human out of the equation, so I can't prompt someone for their PIN because there is no someone. And so when I think about service automation versus strong authentication versus 2FA, we need to find ways to make service automation secure in the face of the fact that historically these have been antithetical patterns. And there are a number of different ways we can do this. I am amazingly excited about a lot of the advances. Some of them you've heard about them this week, around IoT, around Internet of Things, and the ways that we can secure these tiny little internet-connected devices. Paul Madsen's going to solve this for me. I know he is. I'm really excited about the way that we can work across the industry to find ways to use all these different technologies to provide an actually secure solution for service automation. Because especially in the software development space, oh my God, this is the life. This is like the life and death of us. Not that it doesn't exist in other spaces, but it very much comes to the forefront of people's thoughts in the software development space. Because if you want to get to shorter release cycles, if you want to get to shorter development cycles, you got to get the humans out of the way, if only because they need to sleep once in a while. Compliance. Compliance is a fun one. So if you're a software vendor, if you're building product, if all you're looking to do is build the next great 99-cent iPhone app that you can sell to my dad and my mom and people like that, then maybe the slide isn't all that interesting, or maybe the slide isn't all that relevant to you. But if you are looking to sell your product to enterprises, if your goal as a software development company is to sell your product to enterprises, because they're the ones who have all the money, at a certain point in the purchasing, in the procurement conversation, someone in the purchasing office is going to have a form for you to fill out. And that form is going to have acronyms like ISO and SOC and FedRAMP and FISMA and all kinds of alphabet soup. And if you are going it alone, if you are not taking a dependency on a cloud service provider, if you're just going to do this all by yourself, those things become your problem to solve. And the first time you get asked that question and you look at that form, you're going to say, and you're going to go pay a really expensive vendor some ungodly amount of money to come and make your product SOC or ISO or whatever compatible. Whereas, if you take a dependency on a cloud service provider, if you take a dependency on an identity as a service provider, you get to point to your cloud service provider of choice's website that lists out all of their certifications, and you get to say, I am built on Azure and Azure AD, and here are all of Azure and Azure AD's compliance goodies. And you get to walk away and keep building your product and keep building the things that make your product unique, rather than spending your hard-earned time, money, and developer dollars building out identity infrastructure. So, why do we think about identity as a service? Why do we think about cloud adoption to begin with? A couple of different constituencies, and really it all boils down to, what are your customers' needs? Customers want to be able to manage their development teams in a way that ties into their HR and to their identity systems. No, you cannot log in from halfway around the world at 5 a.m. from a 4-year-old Android phone. What makes me really excited here is Alex Simons in his keynote was talking a lot about machine learning and talking a lot about tuning of machine learning collectors. The way that this makes me really excited is we kind of have this running joke that I'm a PM, I'm a program manager, which means that every day I walk into the office, 8:30 in the morning, and I open Outlook, PowerPoint, Slack, SharePoint, and Yammer. And then I work for like 9 hours, and then I go home. So a machine learning system might look at me logging in at 2 a.m. from an IP address in Albonia and say, that's a problem. And they would be right. If I ever see one of my developers check in code at 7 o'clock in the morning, something's wrong. They're not awake yet. And so it's these developments in machine learning and tuning your systems that, again, you can build this stuff by yourself. Or you can go hitch your cart onto a cloud service provider, onto an identity as a service platform, and you can take advantage of not only your provider's learnings and not only your provider's software advances, but you can take advantage of these industry partnerships that are cropping up and that are happening now. Microsoft and Google were on stage demoing together. What magic is this? It's awesome. I love it. And so this is what you want as a customer, as an ISV, or as a one-man developer shop. What do your auditors need? Again, if you're going to be selling stuff to enterprises, you're going to have an auditor knock on your door. You're going to have the IT guy knock on your door. Brian Poole is going to knock on your door and say, I understand that you're this departmental development shop and you just want to get your work done, but I have this list of policies that we as an organization need to adhere to because we are a Fortune 100 company with a fiduciary responsibility to our stakeholders. And he'll be right. And you can either build that yourself, or you can point to your IDaaS provider's controls and say, got it covered. And then the ISV themselves, that's me, or it could be one of you, we want to be able to focus on building our product, not building identity stuff. 2 and 3 years ago, I had 50 some odd developers focused on building out identity stuff because Azure Active Directory didn't exist yet. Or it existed, but it was in preview. It wasn't in the Gartner Magic Quadrant all the way over on the right. Well, guess what? Azure AD is open for business, and I, as a software vendor, as Visual Studio, the software vendor, am saying, yep, I'm betting on you. Here are the identity and security and governance and control things that my customers need in order to be able to develop their software successfully. Yo, Alex, here's my list. I also basically just described the job of a program manager inside of Microsoft. So, kind of went really quick through a bunch of different things. Got lots of resources for people to learn more about Azure Active Directory, about Visual Studio. We have our own YouTube channel, which is kind of cool. If your organization is considering or beginning, or really at any point in your adoption of Agile practices, you really should go out to our YouTube site, because we have this series of videos that documents how Microsoft, as a development organization, we build this thing called Windows, how Microsoft as a development organization went from this every 18-month waterfall cycle to adopting a 3-week sprint cycle. Spoiler alert, sprint 1 and 2 and 3 were train wrecks. We didn't get done anything we wanted to get done. But we kept going, and we're still going. And we're now on sprint, what's today? 102. And we just keep going and getting the stuff out the door, and build, test, deploy, feedback from customers, lather, rinse, repeat. And we want to do it in a secure and scalable fashion. That is what I have for you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Any questions for Laura? No? Oh, hang on.
Hang on just a second. We're recording, so we want mics.
So one of the questions is, if you're running TFS on-prem and you want to use cloud services that integrate with Azure AD, Power BI being one of them, it's a very tough challenge today, and team service doesn't fit every scenario still. We'd love to migrate, but we just can't yet. What are you guys doing about kind of making that experience a little better? Because the marketplace, Power BI, there's a lot of things that just won't work if you're using one of the other products.
Sure, absolutely. And because we ship both a cloud service as well as an on-prem service, we ship our cloud service every 3 weeks. We ship our on-prem service twice a year. 2 major releases, 2 minor releases, so really 4 times a year. We never release something to the cloud without having the thought in our head of, okay, we're going to release this to the cloud and it's going to get there faster because we can, but we always have in our minds, we still have a large contingent of on-prem customers. You're very much obviously one of them, and so we always have this thought in our minds of get it out to the cloud, get it out there first. Okay, now it's there. How do we then get it back on-prem? Some services are easier to do that than others. Architecturally, TFS, Team Foundation Service, you know this, it relies on Windows Integrated Auth. It's not Federation aware, it's not SAML aware. And so some things are easier than others is kind of my simple answer to that. Some things are easier than others, but we always have it in our minds. If there are specific scenarios that are creating pain to you, come and find me in the hall and I will try to get you a more concrete answer than that.
Anyone else? Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Everyone, I think it's lunchtime now. Please fill out those speaker evaluations and have a great rest of the afternoon.